Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 10 team. We're in the top 10 of my 2023 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the Detroit Lions. Make sure to hit the like and leave a comment in the comment section below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's help out with those algorithms and boost this channel's visibility. Detroit. Who would have thought? Who would have thought all these years ago that Detroit would be back the way that they are? And by back, I mean this is as good of a team as they've had in a long time, and they're in the best position now than they've been really in decades to actually take real control of the division. There's no more Brett Favre, no more Aaron Rodgers. It is wide open for them to take over and to build on what they did last year. They were like this team of, the broken toys, it was just. And from top to bottom on that roster, really, you look at the quarterback, Jared Goff. You look at some of the players, just even, the linemen that aren't really respected, but have always been pretty good. Guys like Frank Ragnow, Taylor Decker. And on the defensive side of the ball, they had like this hodgepodge of young players and like undesirable veterans. And their coaching staff with Dan Campbell, who many people pegged as the bridge coach when he got hired in Detroit, that he was going to be the guy that was going to just reset the culture and then they were going to bring in a real head coach. How great has he been with his coaching staff? Ben Johnson, like who was that even? Former player Aaron Glenn. It really opened up opportunities for a lot of former players to get jobs. He did a lot of doing that. He even offered Pat McAfee the special teams coordinator position, I think, at one point. This team was the heartbreak kids basically of last season. They overachieved potentially, but with that overachieving came confidence. And in that confidence, we saw Jared Goff really start to look great. We saw Amon-Ra St. Brown continue to grow as a player. They got rid of TJ Hawkinson and somehow got better on offense, which was a weird thing, but they replaced him with Sam Laporta in the most recent draft. They had DeAndre Swift and like another little group of running backs there. They actually redid their entire running back room with David Montgomery they got from Chicago. And then they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, which was a shocking pick at number 12. Apparently they were going to pick him number 6 over Bijan. So they clearly have a giant plan for him. And I think he's going to be a really good player. It's just a weird... They had a weird first round, I would say. They then drafted Jack Campbell to, I think, close out the Matthew Stafford. The Matthew Stafford trade was closed out with Jahmyr Gibbs. And then Jack Campbell was their original pick. He's coming in to be presumably their 3-down Mike linebacker. And Jahmyr Gibbs has been brought in just to be like the focal point of that offense as a running back and as a receiving back. They had a real big steal in that draft. It was Brian Branch in the second round. He was their 4th pick, I think, of that draft. They took Sam Laporta at the top of the second, then took Brian Branch, who could be playing some corner, could be playing some safety, could be playing some nickel. But that's the thing about Brian Branch, was that he's the guy that can play anywhere in your secondary, and he's going to contribute no matter what you do him with, whether it be in the run game or in the pass game. And we'll get to how he impacts that secondary later. They did not, in my opinion, do a good job of improving the secondary as a whole, however. Which is a weird thing to say because they did add Cameron Sutton, who had a great year last year for Pittsburgh, and they did add Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who had sort of his breakout year, and then for some reason nobody wanted him in free agency. It was a very weird thing for him to see. So, but even with those additions, they then traded Jeffrey Okudah away to the Atlanta Falcons, which I thought was a bit of a mistake. I thought that maybe they saw some more out of Jeff Okudah last season that put him in a position that he earned the right to maybe be on the team and that he might grow into that number 3 overall pick. So I think that there's going to be some deficiencies there for them. The pass rush, I think, is going to be pretty solid. They had two rookies last year. Aiden Hutchinson, of course, the number 2 overall pick, but then James Houston just came out of nowhere as an amazing third down, pin your ears back pass rusher. Probably won't see much of him on early downs, but they got a healthy group that can contribute. Up the middle, maybe not as good as you were hoping. They did kind of reach on Broderick Martin, but I do think he'll get some playing time in there. I think the combination of Aleem McNeil, Isaiah Buggs, who had a bit of a breakout last year as well. There's going to be some contributors out there, and I think that they are continuing to get these guys who are just good for the culture, and I think that these players meld well with what Dan Campbell's trying to bring, and that's why Dan Campbell is the head of one of my favorite coaching staffs, and we will start by talking about them and their rankings. So what can I say about this coaching? It's my 11th coaching staff. It's just outside the top 10, and it's just because of, I think, the experience level here, and I think of what's proven to be, I just can't put them with, an Andy Reid, a Bill Belichick, a John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, Kyle Shanahan, those guys. They're still just outside of that. If they can develop this roster to repeat what it did, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, and improve on the defense side of the ball, this should be a top 10 coaching staff maybe next year. But if that does happen, they'll likely be without their offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, who I thought was a commodity for the Arizona Cardinals last season when they hired Jonathan Gannon instead last season, this past offseason. And he's coming in, and he's got a couple more toys now to play with. I think he's got an upgraded backfield than what he had last year. I think he's got they're coming back with the same offensive line, which I think is a good thing. I think that their guards could see improvement, but I think that their tackles are really solid, so he's going to have some fun to work with there. I think they got a couple little depth things going on. I think they could be always better in that sense. They did lose Evan Brown to the Seattle Seahawks. He was a good, fourth interior offensive lineman who could play anywhere, so they got to figure out a way to replace that with somebody perhaps, because, injuries are going to happen. I think the wide receiver room is looking really good. Jameson Williams is going to be out for 6 weeks, so his rating was actually had to be subtracted here. So the rating for the wide receiver room is going to be a little bit lower than it would had he been able to play all year for the gambling suspension. They lost, like I said, they lost TJ Hawkinson, but somehow got better on offense, and now they have Sam Laporta, who they got out of Iowa, I believe. So him and Brock Wright are going to be working in there. I made these graphics while Shane Zylstra, we'll get to that eventually, he got injured. So they're going to have to find some sort of blocking tight end out of their group, which, may be a little more difficult to find. But overall, the offense is going to be ready to go. Jared Goff's there. They drafted Hendon Hooker. We'll get to that. They signed Teddy Bridgewater. So they got depth at the quarterback position in case the Jared Goff thing's a fluke. So Ben Johnson's got all the tools to really work with here. They really set him up to succeed with a young roster. Probably in terms of when you average out the ages and the experience, it's a great young roster for the offense. Aaron Glenn's got a lot of work cut out for him, though. We said it last year. He had a lot of work cut out for him. And the defense was a detriment to the Detroit Lions all of last season for the most part, at least for the most part. They had a couple good games out there, but for the most part, this defense was giving up a lot of points. And the Lions games were really exciting because of it, because the offense was able to keep up in a lot of cases. But if this defense can get inside the top 20, that's where this Lions team really becomes super dangerous. But there's a lot that Aaron Glenn has to prove, I think. He's very well respected around the NFL. For the last couple of years, he's been somebody that's popped up on the potential head coaching radar, despite especially last year, despite the performance of the Lions defense. Now, the Lions team in general overachieved. The defense had some bright spots. He needs to start showing that he's developing some of these guys, though. I think a good start, real good sign for him would be if we see Aiden Hutchinson take the next step forward. I think another really good Another really good sign would be how that cornerback room performs, because they didn't really fill it up the way that we thought that they would, or that we thought that they would prioritize when you had guys like Christian Gonzalez on the board, when you had guys like Joey Porter Jr. out there, Deontay Banks, and then they passed on all three of those guys in favor of Jack Campbell, the Mike linebacker, which that's a position they did need to improve on, but I'm not so sure that they need to improve on it that early. But clearly they love Jack Campbell, and that's because he was they're not related, but he's a Dan Campbell guy. And Dan Campbell, for all the crap that he got, when he was first hired, he was committed and is committed to setting a specific culture on this team. And he is not afraid to, quote unquote, reach for guys who he feels at a talent level and at a personality level fit what he wants to do. And it's worked out. Even when they weren't that good, they were picking number 2 overall. The people were excited about this Detroit team. They were like, there's something happening here. And then the way they performed last year, it started to show the fruits of the labor there of Dan Campbell, and proving why he was hired to come to a team that's frankly the quote-unquote poverty franchise of the NFL. Them and Cleveland are really the two laughingstocks of the NFL for the history that they've had, especially this last generation. And he's brought hope to this organization. So that alone is what really earns him high praise as like this CEO-style head coach. So now we're going to take a look at the quarterback, and it is Jared Goff's team. He played fantastic last year for the most part. He gets a 78 grade. My concern is what happens when he comes out of the dome, because he played fantastic at home. He threw 23 touchdown passes, but only 6 for the rest of the away games. So there's something happened when he came out of that dome, when he went outside and played. You guys can go back and look at the away games and look at what he did in those away games, and you can see it for yourself. There was something just different about the way he played at home, and the way this offense played at home, the way that he produced, the way he took care of the football, the way that they executed. Can he build on that and get better outside? I think bringing in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a big part of that, especially late in the year when you're playing in Green Bay, when you're playing in Chicago. The weather's getting colder pretty much everywhere except in the South. So you got to be able to produce on offense the way that you do indoors. And that's something that did hold Detroit back in the passing game at the very least. They did draft Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round. He was a first-round talent, fringe first-round talent before his injury. So I think that they really stole him. I remember looking at him and thinking, I think he could be the starter if he's healthy enough and produce just about what Jared Goff gave you. If not in his rookie year, and by his sophomore year, just based on the skill set and the way that the offense is set up. I think bringing in Teddy Bridgewater was a really genius idea. I think that does put Nate Sudfeld, who's not listed here, on the outs here. Adrian Martinez, I think, is the other one. I think both of those guys are gone from the roster by the start of the season. Bridgewater, I think, clearly brought in to be the backup for this year while Hendon Hooker recovers, while Hendon Hooker learns. And I think learning behind a guy like Teddy Bridgewater is really good for Hendon Hooker. And also not having the pressure of having to be the backup quarterback, because there is work to be done there when you're a backup quarterback. I think people don't realize that a backup quarterback is not just about your talent level. That's why a guy like Brian Hoyer was one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL, because he fit that skill set. And that's why certain guys just can't be backups, because it's just not who they are. I think Jared Goff is going to have all the tools, and I think Bridgewater is going to be really good for Jared Goff as well, and how he produces. And I think that this rating, if this rating holds for Goff, he doesn't necessarily have to be any better than this for this team to see a lot of success. But I think the potential is there. He is a former first overall pick. maybe he's finally found himself, and we'll see him build upon what he did last year and get into like 35 plus touchdowns, keep the turnovers in single digits, and get the passing yards up to 4,600 yards. That's a real possibility. Now, their actual running back room in terms of turnaround, hand the ball off, is not graded that high for me. I mean, I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's, like I said, I think he was a really good pick. But I think where he's going to really shine is in the passing game. He's got that Alvin Kamara playing style. I think he drew a lot of comparisons to Alvin Kamara in the draft process. And I think that is a really solid pro comp for him. David Montgomery gets a 71. I think when he's healthy, he could be really good first and second down back. It's just you concerned about his ability to stay on the field. I think that's always a concern at this point for Montgomery. I don't know why they didn't bring back Jamal Williams. I think that the combination of Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamal Williams would have been absolutely fantastic. But they decided to go a different route with that for whatever reason. But when you get into the receiving aspect of it, this is where Jahmyr Gibbs really shines. He gets an 80 grade, one of the best ones. Craig Reynolds is a good backup in that sense, but I don't think he's so much better than a guy like David Montgomery that he's going to steal a lot of snaps from him. I think that we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs probably eat up about 65% of the snaps, and then David Montgomery will probably get 30, with guys like Jamar Jefferson and Craig Reynolds getting 5. If the running back room is something that stays healthy. If Montgomery does go down, then Craig Reynolds, I think, will pick up some slack in a few aspects. I think Jamar Jefferson will then also do that. But for as long as it's healthy, even if Craig Reynolds is a little bit better than David Montgomery, if they need a running back to come in a third down situation, passing situation, and Gibbs needs to be off the field for whatever reason, I still think it'll be David Montgomery doing that. But I think that Jahmyr Gibbs this year is going to be that maybe gets 110 carries and like 80 catches. Like, I think it could be something like that for him. And it turns out he like combined for over 1,000 yards and like maybe gets to 10 touchdowns. I think that would be a really good rookie year for him where he's contributing a lot in every aspect of the game. And I could see David Montgomery perhaps poaching a lot of those short yardage touchdowns the way that we saw Jamal Williams do last year. I think that that's a possibility, at least early on in the year. I don't think they'll want to be wearing out Jahmyr Gibbs by just running him into the ground. I think when you invest the 12th pick in your running back, you at least want him to withstand the 5 years of his rookie deal, even with the running back market the way that it is right now. So you don't want to necessarily give him 300 touches in his rookie year if you can help it, especially when you got a guy like David Montgomery who can, when healthy, like I said, be a guy you can hand the ball off to on first down, on second and short, and get it some really good production out of. Now we're going to take a look at the receivers and the tight ends, and they found a diamond in the rough in Amon-Ra St. Brown in that draft. I wasn't really high on him, and boy was I wrong. He is a great receiver, a true wide receiver one in the NFL. He's produced it as such. Absolute, just a great target for Jared Goff, and I expect him to build on what he's been doing, which has already been very impressive. Jameson Williams, going into his second year, is now going to miss some more games on the front end. So he's not going to be back till week 7. But that combination between those two guys, I think, is really good. I think that they could stand to get a true, like that big body, big catch radius receiver that actually has like starter capabilities. Because they have Khalif Raymond, who they just extended, who's like a nice gadget guy, nice return guy, who's also going to be, I think, very effective. He's that type of player that I think Dan Campbell really likes. The one that gets counted out that then they give the ball to and he makes some big plays. And then there's Sam Laporta, Iowa tight end. They drafted, gets a 75 grade. Comes in a really solid receiver. I think he really helps out this offense. A cheaper option what they had in TJ Hawkinson. I think they stole Hawkinson. That trade with Hawkinson because they somehow got better. Like, it was the best like win-win trade between them and Minnesota. They brought back Marvin Jones, who I guess could be that outside guy. Maybe it's Denzel Mims, who they just acquired from the Jets. Maybe he finally starts to show up in the NFL after just falling off the face of the earth with the Jets. They got Josh Reynolds, Tom Kenny. I think are some depth guys. Even though Denzel Mims is the lowest ranked guy for me, I think in terms of his potential, he could see a lot of playing time. I think Khalif Raymond, though he ranks higher, he's the third highest ranked receiver for me in terms of his overall ability and what I think he can contribute. I don't know that he gets more snaps than a guy like Marvin Jones, for example, if Marvin Jones stays healthy, just because of the skill set. And I think that Denzel Mims has a real opportunity as well to step in there, especially early in the year with Jamison Williams out. I think that's going to open this offense up for a Marvin Jones and for a Denzel Mims to make a name for themselves and to maintain high amounts of playing time come week 7 when you get Jamison Williams back. James Mitchell and Brock Wright. I think I said Brock Mitchell at one point was the thing. I combined the two guys. Both of them played quite well in that second half of the season. Again, Shane Zystra, he's out, so just disregard him. As far as I know, I think he tore his ACL prior to me filming this video, so forgive me for that. But I think that the tight end room, they know how to use these guys and their skill sets. They showed a really good propensity for that last year when TJ Hawkinson was gone. So I expect sort of much of the same here. I think a good, healthy tight end rotation is something that we'll see out of this team. Now let's talk about this offensive line, and we'll start with the pass blocking. 2 really good tackles. Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell, love them. You get Big V there playing the right guard position. He's a converted tackle. They gave him a big contract. He hasn't lived up to that contract at all. I thought he could be a cut candidate, but they had the money and they couldn't figure out a way to get somebody that they thought was better. So they kept him, and I'm not opposed to that. If you're going to have the money, if you're not going to spend it elsewhere, if you're just going to have the money sitting there not being used, then, keep a guy on the offensive line who's solid enough that you're not downgrading the offensive line. Their offensive line was good, decent at times, good at times. So why would you risk it being worse? It just doesn't make any sense. So it was a good thing to retain him. Jonah Jackson is there. He's had some really good moments, had some bad moments. Frank Ragnow, veteran center. Really like him. 69 pass blocking. Nice. Now this is where this is where I get nervous for him. They basically signed Graham Glasgow, who used to be on this team before. They basically signed him to be the replacement for what they had in Evan Brown, who left to go to Seattle. Graham Glasgow can play center. He can play left guard, right guard. Could even play some tackle, I guess, if you need him to. But in terms of pass blocking, he's the only option here. Jermaine Ifedi is just, in my opinion, terrible. Logan Stenberg, ugh. Ross Pierschbacher is a pure backup center. So I think that he makes the team. I think Pierschbacher and Glasgow, unless Pierschbacher or Glasgow's already been cut by the time you see this, in which case, oops. But I like them really the best out of this depth group that they have here. I would be fearful, though, if they lost one of the tackles. I think that's going to be a giant issue. But even if they lost Frank Ragnow for a couple weeks, I think Graham Glasgow could step in, but I would still be kind of nervous about it. Now, their offensive line in terms of run blocking takes a giant step up, in my opinion. It's so much better in the run game, which I think is really going to help Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery specifically. And you hope that Montgomery can stay healthy. He outplays the grade that I gave him, and that Jahmyr Gibbs grows throughout the season, gets some opportunities to just, run between the tackles and take on that Alvin Kamara role, and then basically be Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram in those prime years of that combination. But Decker, he's a little bit worse as a run blocker, but I think he's just so solid across the board. One of the most underrated left tackles in the league. Penei Sewell's a fantastic run blocker, plays that right tackle position very well. Big V, you know what you're getting from him. Sort of is what it is. Jonah Jackson and Frank Ragnow take giant steps up, though. So I think their ability to run the ball effectively to both sides of the offensive line, which is not something that is notorious for most teams in the NFL. They usually have one really good side to run the ball at. You get pulling guards and pulling tackles and everything. But this is a really good starting group. The depth doesn't get much better, though. That's the real thing. Graham Glasgow is really the only true competent backup that they have. And that's why when he said he is the Evan Brown replacement. And I think that we need to see Stenberg step up. He's been in the league now a couple of years, I think, Logan Stenberg. He needs to establish himself as a really good depth piece this year. I think that's really going to be important for this offensive line. And Jermaine Ifedi and Matt Nelson, I think, are going to be in competition throughout this entire camp to be that third tackle, be that swing tackle that they really do need. You could kick Big V out to tackle if you needed to, and Graham Glasgow goes to guard. I think that would be the route that they would go if they were to lose Decker or Sewell. But you do want somebody else to be an option there, and they just don't have it. And this is what makes me question the offense, is the depth of the offensive line. So just going over a positional summary, the starting groups that they have really across the board are all solid. In one way, shape, or form, they're all solid. We're going to see some split time between Gibbs and Montgomery. We're going to see, the wide receiver blocking is actually really good. You're going to see these outside runs. That's why Jahmyr Gibbs, getting them on the outside, it could be a absolute amazing experience to see because of the wide receiver blocking is so good. The tight end blocking, you can find some like quality in there, combination. You could even, I think something that you could see as well is perhaps Graham Glasgow does come in, plays the guard. Haloti Vaitai goes to right tackle, and then Penei Sewell, who we did see play some tight end in those bigger packages last year, I think that's a possibility too. We could see that. So that could improve the overall run blocking for this group. It's just the depth is really the concern here. They got really good depth at quarterback, but the offensive line, I think, is where the depth really starts to fall apart. And that could be the ultimate downfall for this offense. Overall, though, 5th best offense in the NFL for me. 8th passing, 8th rushing. I love everything that this offense is looking like. And when Jameson Williams comes back, I think the sky's the limit for the passing game at that point. But again, this is all barring a significant injury on the offensive line, really. Which I think no team can afford to get a significant injury on the offensive line, but I think Detroit is one of the more fragile teams in that sense. So now let's go to the pass rush, and this is really the front four here. We got James Houston, Aiden Hutchinson, the 2 second-year players there, main edge guys. Aiden Hutchinson's your do-it-all, 3-down edge guy. James Houston's the one that's going to come in those passing situations and build off of what he did the last 2 months of last season. You got a really big gap-eating interior with Isaiah Buggs and Aleem McNeil, who, they really, I think those guys, especially Isaiah Buggs, they're sort of the epitome of this Detroit team, where it's like they're not superstars. They might not ever be. But if you're putting guys in there that are going to give you effort beyond anyone else, these are the guys you put in. And you look at some of the edge depth here. Charles Harris, good edge depth as a third option to rush the passer. The Okwara brothers really fell off as edge rushers, man, in terms of the pass rush aspect. Josh Pascal really never got a true chance. He sort of got lost in the shuffle there with James Houston really coming onto the scene. So Pascal, he couldn't really find his role. Was he an interior guy? Is he an edge guy? I think this year will be really important for him really finding his place on this defensive front. really good interior depth for the pass rush. John Kaminsky, he's sort of like another Isaiah Buggs, where he's an effort guy, a character guy, and he always seems to just find himself in the right places, even if it's by accident. I really like Benito Jones. And then the rookie Broderick Martin, I think will really get an opportunity here as like the third and as part of like a three-man interior rotation when it comes to third downs. I think Aleem McNeil, Buggs, and Martin are your three main guys for pass rush up the interior. Levi Wuzurike, I was a fan of his. I'm not so sure that he's that guy anymore. They've done a lot of, Aleem McNeil, they brought back Isaiah Buggs, they drafted Broderick Martin. They're doing a lot of things to sort of replace him. He's never really came into the place that they really wanted him to. Now we look at them against the run, and they're not nearly as good. You see Julian Okwara come in, John Kaminsky come in, but really, Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson are your three down guys, in my opinion, and then the rest of it's, I think, going to be up to a rotation, especially here on the early downs and the running situations. You don't really have any depth on the edge at all. If James Houston can develop and take a step forward in that, you might just have James Houston and Aiden Hutchinson be 2-3 down edge players. That could be a real possibility, especially if we see Julian Okwara go down. They don't really have anyone else. Romeo Okwara is just extremely overpaid at this point. I think he's like a worse version of Big V for this team, where it's like you keep him because where else are you going to put the money sort of thing, and you hope that he can revitalize himself and get to a more elite place. And the interior, there's not much depth here in the run game early on either. Broderick Martin, I think, can really contribute. I think that it was a reach of a draft pick, but the more I sort of watched him and all that and educated myself on him a little bit, I think he does have, especially the way that this roster's set up, he is like the number 3 interior guy right out the gate. So if you can push him and develop him, put him in opportunities, give him opportunities to really succeed, then he could become, an every down interior guy for you, which is fantastic value. Isaiah Buggs probably could develop a little bit more, being more gap disciplined. Benito Jones as well. Levi Wuzurike, I think especially because of Josh Paschal, then probably, I would say, smartly looking for a role for Paschal in this defense. It probably leaves in Wuzurike on the outside looking in. Let's go to the linebackers, and we'll start with the linebackers in the passing game. There's Jack Campbell. Got drafted in the first round. He's your 3-down all-purpose linebacker, and it's a matter of who you're going to find to be the number 2 guy. They brought back Alex Anzalone, who had some really good moments last year, but he's still just not. I still don't really get it with him. I think he's a good depth linebacker, good part of a rotation. But in this group, he's going to get a lot of playing time. Because you do have Malcolm Rodriguez, who, for a late day 3 pick, was good, but he still was a rookie, making a lot of bonehead rookie plays, especially in the pass game. Derek Barnes is sort of a hybrid. He's sort of a 4-3 outside linebacker stuck in a 3-4 defense. But I think in the run game, that's really more of where he's going to show some contributions here. And that's where he's one of the better ones on the roster. He gets a 77 grade. Jack Campbell goes up to a 77 as well. So I think in terms of the run game, this is really going to help up the middle, where they're a little softer on the interior defensive line, where you're going to see these 3-man fronts that'll consist of Aleem McNeil, John Kaminsky, and then maybe Broderick Martin or Benito Jones, which might be a little, Swiss cheese a bit, for the lack of a better term. I think having these 2 guys in there, it's a really good 2-man group for that linebacking squad. And then, even Jalen Reeves-Maybin and Malcolm Rodriguez, I think, are also really good options. They're a really good part of the rotation there. I think Campbell and Barnes are sort of your 1 and 2 right now, and you hope that Rodriguez can develop and maybe take Barnes' place, and then have Campbell and Rodriguez be your 1-2 at inside linebacker for the next couple of years. And Anzalone, just in the run game, I'm just not a fan. Not really a fan of his at all since his rookie year in New Orleans, but he keeps finding work somehow. He somehow keeps getting a job. Somehow. So now let's go look at the pass coverage. And average, I guess, is what you'd call this group. Perpetually average. Emmanuel Moseley comes over from San Francisco. He was good, but, is he a number 1 corner? I don't know. Cam Sutton came over from Pittsburgh, and sort of the way that they set this up, he's going to have to play outside corner. He really thrived as a nickel guy because they got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's like a safety / box safety / nickel. Then Brian Branch, who we talked about at the top, he's sort of the same as Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to a degree. Maybe he does play outside corner. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson plays more of a safety role. And for me, I would play Brian Branch as just a straight-up safety. Maybe drop him into the box, on early downs. That could be something that you do. But I think his main purpose should be as a regular safety, sort of with Tracy Walker there in the back. Let Chauncey Gardner-Johnson play as more of your box safety. But then you have find an outside guy because of Cameron Sutton. Cameron Sutton was picked up because he was a great nickel guy. And nickel guys can play outside guys can play in nickel, but you sort of want to get what you paid for to a degree, I guess, right? So is Brian Branch going to play outside corner? I mean, he can. I don't recommend it, especially in his rookie year, but I mean, he could. I kind of like Brian Branch to be more of like a Devin McCourty. If that makes sense. You look at some of the depth here. I mean, they got Will Harris. Kirby Joseph had a really good year last year. They kind of went out of their way to put guys in front of him, though. I'm a big fan of Brandon Joseph in the passing game. He never really stepped up to be that top flight safety that I think people were expecting at this time last year when he made the move. I think he moved from Northwestern to Notre Dame or from Notre Dame to Northwestern. One of the two. Forgive me, there's like 75 million players. Chase Lucas was like that Hard Knocks camp hero who just really kind of let's call him hot and cold throughout the year. Ifeatu Melifonwu is sort of in the same vein as a Brian Branch and a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Like, he's a corner, but he's a safety. I don't know how they're going to navigate through this group. I think Kirby Joseph is really the only one here that's going to see any type of significant playing time in terms of the depth pieces. So now we're going to take a look at the run support, and this is where a guy like Sutton playing in the nickel was really effective. Brian Branch, really effective in the run game as well. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, solid. I would say above average in the run game also. Moseley and Tracy Walker, you're not going to get much out of them in the run game. You just haven't last year at least. So I mean, this is where it's like, is this going to be like is Aaron Glenn going to adjust and become like a Wink Martindale type defense where it's sort of positionless and everyone sort of can play everywhere? Because you see some of the depth of Kirby Joseph. He's the second best safety, I guess. Third best safety if Brian Branch and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are considered safeties who play nickel. So I think that you got 6 guys in the secondary that you could rotate around, and if you can be creative with them, maybe you have a group that outplays their individual skill levels. But I still think they didn't do enough in the cornerback room specifically to get a true outside receiver. I think that outside corner. They had it, I thought, with Jeffrey Okudah. And I thought that when they had Okudah, Mosley, and Sutton as their three for a while there before they traded away Okudah, I was like, that's a pretty solid group of three right there. Because, does Okudah take the next step up? He's at least a cornerback 2, I think, in the NFL. At least he was heading in that direction towards cornerback 1. And then they traded him. They got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I was like, you're getting a little redundant here. And then they drafted Brian Branch. Really exciting, but a little redundant. So I just don't know what they're going to be doing with this cornerback, with this defensive back room in general. It's going to be, I think that's the biggest question mark of this team. Not that they don't have the talent, but how they're going to use the talent. So you look at just the overall positional summaries here. Like we said, really good edge group for the pass rush. I think the linebackers in the run game are really going to make up for some deficiencies up front. Even the cornerbacks, I think that next edge setting group of the nickel and the dime and the box safeties, I think it's going to be really effective in the run game as well. My concern is just how these guys are going to get used in the passing game, and I think they're in a position where I think they can be picked on and exploited, kind of like what they were last year. So how Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell and the position coaches sort of work together and repair all the deficiencies they had last year is going to be essential. So you can see the overall the defense is 26th in the NFL. 22nd pass defense, 26th rush defense. It really is what held back this team last year from making the playoffs, and it potentially could cost them this year. I think that the division that they're in, I think that they're playing with so much confidence, they have so much momentum, that it's impossible for them to not find themselves in this ranked this high in the NFL by the end of the regular season. With that said, I got them winning 11 games this year. And the losses, I think, are very calculated. We go back to Jared Goff playing in the Dome at home, 23 touchdowns. On the road, 6 touchdowns. Significantly different. Kansas City on the road, Baltimore on the road, Dallas on the road, Minnesota on the road, Chicago on the road. I think very self-explanatory. They play on the road against New Orleans, that's indoors. They play on the road in the Chargers, that's outside in nice hot weather. They play outdoors against Tampa Bay, Florida weather, nice weather. And then they play in September in Green Bay, where they don't need to worry about it being freezing cold, potentially raining, but whatever. So, again, very calculated for me. 5 of their 6 losses come on the road. I think that's going to be the story of this team for this season. So, just a quick summary. I do have the Detroit Lions winning the NFC North Division this year at an 11-6 record, 4th best team in the conference, 10th in the league, 11th best coaching staff with the number 5 offense in the NFL, but a 26th ranked defense. That could be the inevitable downfall, and I think it is what prevents them from getting to that next level. I think that they can win a playoff game this year, but they will be one of those teams that screams one and done just because of the lack of trust, lack of talent, so to speak, on the defense. And there you have it. My number 10 team, the Detroit Lions. This 2023 Deep Dive series is almost complete. We're into the top 10. Man, Detroit, is this not everyone's second favorite team right now, unless you're a fan of an NFC North team? Like, come on, man. How do you not cheer for these guys? Hit like the video, leave your comments in the comment section below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I got the rest of the videos right up here. the rest of the series. We're almost down to the wire. We're into the preseason. Oh my God. Football's back, baby. See you guys in the next video.